Hello, I'm Monaco, and for years, my brother mocked me, belittled me, and tried to keep me in my place. But while touring apartments, something changed. As I stood there, humiliated, ready to give in, the concierge looked me dead in the eye and said, "Your jet awaits." My brother's face went white. What happened next was nothing short of a power shift. This was the moment I stopped being the weak one in the family. The city around me was an ocean of glass and steel, the kind of place that made you feel small, insignificant, if you let it. But I wasn't going to let it. I never did. As I stood outside the high-rise apartment building, I took a deep breath and straightened my jacket. It wasn't about the view or the apartment, it never was. It was about proving a point. To myself, to them, to everyone who ever doubted me. I wasn't supposed to be here. Not in the eyes of my family. They saw me as the underdog, the one who always had to fight to be heard, always the one they underestimated. And my brother? He was the crown jewel of the family, always the favorite, always the successful one. I hated how he made me feel like I was invisible. But today I was going to make him see me, really see me. I adjusted my sunglasses and walked inside. The lobby was pristine, shining with opulence, the kind of place where you felt out of place if you didn't belong. And that's how it always felt. Like I was trying to fit into a world that wasn't mine. But I was here now. And I was going to prove them wrong. My brother was already inside, waiting. He was leaning against the marble counter, looking as smug as ever. He didn't even acknowledge my presence at first, too busy on his phone, scrolling through whatever bullshit he'd chosen to distract himself with today. I took a moment to assess him. Tall, sharp jawline, perfectly styled hair, he had everything. Everything except humility. "Hey," I finally said, breaking the silence. He looked up, that smirk of his appearing instantly. "Hey sis, you really think you can afford this place?" He chuckled, shaking his head, clearly amused. "Stop pretending. I know you're just here to look around." His words hit me like a punch to the gut, the dismissive tone, the arrogance it stung more than I cared to admit. But I wasn't going to show him that. I wasn't going to let him see how much it hurt, so I smiled. A small, tight smile. "Actually, I can afford it." The realtor, standing nearby, glanced nervously between the two of us. I could feel the tension in the air. It wasn't the first time my brother had made me feel small, and it wouldn't be the last. But I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. Not in front of someone else, especially not in front of someone who didn't know the history of my family, of him. "Okay," the realtor said, a little too eagerly. "Would you like to see the penthouse, or the second property first, ma'am?" I glanced at him, then back at my brother, whose smile had faltered slightly, though he tried to mask it. "Let's start with the penthouse," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the fury simmering inside. The realtor led us to the elevator, and as the doors closed, I felt a momentary surge of power. I wasn't just walking into this building, I was walking into the future I had earned. I had the power to choose, and today, I was choosing myself. My brother, though, didn't seem to understand. He was still scoffing, still pretending like he had it all figured out, still treating me like I was nothing. But I wasn't the same person I used to be. I wasn't going to play by his rules anymore. As we reached the top floor, I let my eyes wander over the penthouse. It was stunning, everything I'd imagined and more. But this wasn't just about the apartment. This was about more than that. It was about showing him and showing everyone that I didn't need their validation. We stood there for a moment in silence, the view sprawling out before us. But just as I was starting to settle into this new sense of control, the realtor spoke again, his voice breaking the stillness. "Your jet awaits," he said, as casually as if he were offering us a tour of a modest flat. The words hit harder than I expected. My brother's face dropped, his arrogant smirk turning into something else. Something uncertain. I smiled to myself, not letting it show on my face. But inside, I felt a rush of satisfaction. This was it, the moment where everything changed. Where he realized that I wasn't who he thought I was. That I wasn't just some girl trying to keep up. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The high-rise, the city skyline, my brother's disbelief, it all faded into the background as I let the moment settle. He wasn't the only one with power in this family anymore. I had something he didn't, something no one could take from me. My brother laughed awkwardly, trying to play it off, but the seed of doubt had been planted. He tried to recover, but I could see it. The shift, the change in the air. I'd disrupted his perfect little world, and it felt good. We headed back toward the elevator, my brother trailing behind me, still silent. As the doors closed, I looked at myself in the mirrored walls, not just at the reflection in front of me, but at everything I had been, everything I had overcome. For the first time, I realized that the person I had to prove myself to wasn't them. It was me, and I had done it. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and for a brief second, the tension that hung in the air felt almost suffocating. The penthouse had been stunning, breathtaking even, but now, as we stood in the midst of it, all I could feel was the weight of the situation. My brother's casual mockery still echoed in my ears. I could tell he didn't believe me, not for a second. He was the kind of guy who assumed the world would bend to his will because it always had. And I was the one who fought tooth and nail for every ounce of recognition I got. Every step I'd taken had been under the shadow of his success. He never saw me as his equal. If anything, I was always the afterthought. But today, that was going to change. I stood there, arms crossed, my gaze fixed on the view. My brother was trying to ignore me, still pretending I wasn't worth the time of day. It wasn't about the apartment anymore. It never had been. It was about showing him that I was more than just a shadow, that I had built my own world and it wasn't small. He looked over at me, that usual arrogant smirk still plastered on his face. "So, you really think you can afford this place?" His voice was dripping with condescension. "Come on, sis, don't get ahead of yourself." His words cut deeper than I cared to admit, but I wasn't going to show it, not now. Not when I could feel the adrenaline running through my veins, telling me that this was my moment. I wasn't just going to take it, I was going to stand tall, no matter how hard it got. I looked over at him and smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile you give when you're excited. It was the kind of smile you give when you know you've been underestimated and you're about to show the world that they were wrong. "I can afford it," I said calmly, my voice steady. He paused, caught off guard. For just a split second, the smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered, shaking his head like he'd just heard a ridiculous joke. He wasn't convinced, but he was definitely intrigued. "Yeah, right," he muttered, rolling his eyes. But I could see it now, the doubt in his gaze. The seed was planted, and there was no going back. I could feel the tension in the room. The realtor was shifting nervously, trying to avoid eye contact. He clearly didn't know how to handle this family drama unfolding in front of him. He was just a bystander, unsure of how to proceed. But it didn't matter. I wasn't going to let him get in the way of proving my point. I could hear my brother making another dismissive comment under his breath, but I tuned him out. This wasn't about him. Not anymore. This was about me. About taking control of my life in a way I never had before. I wasn't going to let anyone dictate who I was or what I could do. I had spent my entire life proving myself. But today, in front of these people who'd never seen me as worthy, I wasn't going to fight for approval. I was simply going to stand my ground. And that, in itself, would be enough. "I'm not pretending," I said quietly. "I can afford this place. I don't need anyone's approval." The shift in the room was immediate. My brother's posture stiffened. He didn't know how to respond. The facade he'd built around himself, the one where he was always in control, began to crack. I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't sure if I was bluffing or if I was telling the truth, but either way, I had his attention now. There was a slight pause, and the realtor, sensing the shift, tried to move the conversation along. "Would you like to see the penthouse now?" he asked hesitantly. I nodded, and as we moved to the elevator, the tension between me and my brother was palpable. He was trying to play it cool, but I could see it in his eyes. Something was changing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being overlooked. As we ascended to the top floor, I let myself enjoy the moment, the power I was starting to feel. For so long, I had been told who I was and what I could do. Today, I was deciding for myself. When we stepped into the penthouse, I could see my brother's discomfort. This was a place he thought was out of my reach, a world I wasn't supposed to inhabit. But the longer we stood there, the more I realized that this was where I belonged. I had worked for this, even if no one else saw it. The realtor was quiet, observing the tension between us. He was clearly uncomfortable, but I wasn't here to make him feel better. I was here to make a statement. And then, just as the silence between us grew heavy, the realtor spoke again. "Your jet awaits," he said, so casually, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. I couldn't help but smile, though I kept it subtle. My brother's expression dropped, the smirk completely disappearing. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had never shown him my true wealth, my true power. But now, with just one sentence, I had shattered his illusion. He was no longer the one with all the answers. The air in the room changed. My brother tried to laugh it off, but the seed of doubt was planted. He was starting to see that maybe, just maybe, I was more than what he thought. Maybe I had been playing the game my own way all along. As we left the penthouse, the weight of the moment hung in the air. I had made my mark, and even though my brother still scoffed, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't the same person I used to be. I was no longer the underdog in my own story. "Show me the penthouse," I said to the realtor, my voice steady and calm. "It's more private." I turned and walked toward the elevator, my heart pounding, not from fear or uncertainty, but from a quiet triumph. The silence in the car was thick. We had just left the penthouse, and even the hum of the engine seemed to fade under the weight of the moment. My brother was unusually quiet beside me, no smirk on his face, just a forced calm that didn't quite mask the discomfort he was feeling. I looked out the window, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. My declaration had shaken him, but I couldn't tell if it was the apartment, the jet, or the fact that I had refused to play along with his usual script. I could almost feel his disbelief radiating from his side of the car, and yet, a part of me felt a sense of satisfaction. For the first time, I'd spoken up, and he hadn't had the final word. Still, there was this gnawing feeling inside me. It wasn't relief or victory. It was more like an uncomfortable sense of uncertainty, like I had just stepped into a new role that I wasn't entirely sure I was ready for. My mind kept racing. Did this one moment really mean I had won? Or was it just another step in my never-ending quest to prove myself to a family that never believed in me? The car stopped at a red light, and I found myself staring at the reflection of the city lights on the glass. Was this what success looked like? Was this the feeling I had been chasing all these years? Or was it just another empty victory, one that would fade when my family's approval didn't follow? I shook my head. I couldn't get caught up in their judgments anymore. I had spent too long measuring my worth against their expectations. Today, I had taken control, but it was only the beginning. The door to the car clicked open, and I snapped out of my thoughts. We were back at the family house, a place I had always felt small in. My brother was already halfway to the door, not waiting for me. Not that I expected him to. I walked in behind him, but I could feel the eyes on me. My father, sitting in his usual chair by the fireplace, didn't even look up. His disappointment hung in the air like a cloud, thick and suffocating. My sister sat on the couch, arms crossed, her gaze filled with something I couldn't quite read: jealousy. Maybe? It didn't matter. Nothing they could say now would affect me. I knew they were all thinking the same thing. How long would this last? They thought I was playing at something, that this newfound confidence would crumble as quickly as it had come. But I was done caring. I wasn't trying to win their approval anymore. I was doing this for myself. "Nice apartment," my brother said with a sneer, not even bothering to mask his contempt. "You really think you're going to make it here?" His words stung, but they didn't hold the same weight anymore. For the first time, I felt a spark of defiance. A quiet strength that had been building inside me for years. I wasn't the same girl who once shrunk under his words. I was someone different now. Stronger. More determined. "I'm not pretending," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding. "I can afford it. And I'm not done yet." The silence in the room deepened. I could feel their disbelief, their dismissiveness, but it didn't matter. I wasn't asking for their approval. I wasn't begging them to believe in me. I had already made my decision. My father finally spoke, his voice low and tinged with something I couldn't place. "Monaco, we've talked about this. You can't keep living like this. You need to think about your future, about settling down." I felt the anger rising in my chest, but I kept it contained. It wasn't about the apartment or the lifestyle anymore. It was about the constant barrage of judgment from the people I had tried to impress my entire life. "Dad, I'm not asking for your approval," I said, cutting him off. "I'm not your little girl anymore, and I don't need you to tell me how to live." There it was. The words I had been too afraid to say for so long. I had spent my entire life trying to meet their expectations, living in their shadow, letting their criticism dictate my choices. But not anymore. I wasn't that person, and I didn't need to apologize for it. I turned to face my brother, who was watching the exchange with an almost amused expression. "You know what? I'm done waiting for you to see me as enough. I don't need your approval, either." The tension in the room was palpable. My father's face twisted with something like frustration, but I didn't care. My brother's smirk was gone, replaced by something more uncertain, more vulnerable. It was a small victory, but it was mine. But then, just as the conversation seemed to die down, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It was a message, a simple text with an invitation, a gala in LA. The kind of event where I could show the world exactly who I was. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The opportunity felt almost too perfect. But as the weight of my family's silence settled around me, I realized something. This was my moment. This was my chance to step fully into the world I had created, the world I had fought for. I wasn't just going to prove myself to them. I was going to prove it to the world. I looked up at my family, who were still processing everything. My father's disappointment was evident. My brother's anger was barely contained. And my sister? She just looked lost. "Show me the penthouse," I said, more to myself than anyone else. My voice steady. I felt a thrill of power, of purpose, coursing through me. It wasn't just the penthouse. It was everything that came with it. The life I had built, the future I was creating. I was ready. It had been a few days since the dinner, since the confrontation that left the air thick with unresolved tension. Sitting by the window of my luxury apartment, I tried to center myself. The city below was bathed in the soft light of early morning, and for a moment, everything felt still calm. But beneath the surface, everything was churning. The events of the past week had created a ripple, one I wasn't sure how to stop. The power had shifted, that much was clear. I had made my stand. But now, I had to figure out what came next. The power I'd seized with my words felt fragile. I couldn't shake the feeling that, despite everything, my family saw me as a fraud. Was it really over? Or was this just another chapter in my quest for their approval? The self-doubt crept in like a shadow, despite my best efforts to push it aside. But I wasn't the girl I used to be. I had learned to silence the voices in my head, the ones that told me I wasn't good enough. And today, I would face whatever came next with my head held high. I was prepared to confront the past, to stop letting the wounds of my family's disdain dictate my future. I closed my eyes, taking in the quiet. The wind was soft against the glass, the city's pulse so far removed from the turmoil inside me. I reminded myself that this was a win. I had spoken up. I had proven something to myself. But the next test was coming, the dinner with my family. I knew what to expect, the tension, the mockery, the subtle digs. But this time, I wouldn't back down. I wasn't the same girl who cowered under their judgment. Today would be the day I would truly confront them, not for their approval, but for my own peace of mind. And the weight of that thought stirred something deep inside me, a fire that had been smoldering for years, one that was now beginning to burn brighter. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was my mother. Monaco. Her voice was soft but firm. "We need to talk." I let out a quiet sigh. "About what, Mom?" "About everything. The apartment, your success, this life you've chosen. You've been distant. It's time we sit down and talk about it." I could hear the unspoken words in her tone. She wasn't asking for a conversation. She was demanding an explanation, a chance to rein me in. My heart skipped a beat. The weight of her judgment pressed down on me, but I knew what I had to do. "I'll come," I said, the decision already made. It wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about standing my ground. I prepared myself mentally. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. This dinner would be my opportunity to show them that I was not the same Monaco they had known. I was someone else, now someone stronger. As the day wore on, I couldn't shake the nerves that built up inside me. The anticipation was like a constant hum, vibrating through my body. I'd fought so long to be seen as more than just the family's disappointment. I had finally found my voice. Now, I had to find the courage to speak the truth in the face of all their judgment. The dinner felt like a battlefield. When I walked through the door, the air immediately shifted. My father didn't look up from his paper, but his silence was a statement. My brother barely hid the disdain in his smirk. And my sister, she was somewhere in between, unsure, uncomfortable, but unwilling to speak up. There it was again. The weight of their judgment. The look that said, "You'll never make it." The sense that, no matter how far I came, I'd always be that little girl trying to prove myself. It was my brother who spoke first. "Nice to see you finally make it. But Monaco, we both know this is just another phase. You'll get bored, and then what?" The jab hit its mark, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't afford to. Instead, I looked him in the eye, steady and calm. "Actually, I think this phase is here to stay," I said, my voice even. "And I'm not done yet." The room fell silent. For a brief moment, I could see the surprise flash across his face. It wasn't the response he expected. He laughed it off, trying to mask his discomfort with a dismissive chuckle. But his eyes betrayed him. There was doubt there now. Real doubt. My father finally spoke, his voice tinged with disappointment. This lifestyle of yours. It's just too much, Monaco. It's not sustainable. You need to think about the future, about your place in this family." I felt the anger rise in my chest, but I fought to keep my voice steady. "What I need is for you to stop treating me like a child who can't make her own decisions. I'm not the girl you once knew. I've moved on." His face darkened, and for a moment, I saw the man who had tried to shape me into what he thought was best. The man who had tried to control me my entire life. And for the first time, I felt no fear. "I don't need your approval, Dad," I said, my voice strong. "I've made it this far on my own. I'll keep going, with or without your blessing." The silence that followed was deafening. My brother scoffed and walked out of the room, unwilling to acknowledge the truth of what I'd said. My sister remained quiet, her arms crossed, still unsure of what to make of it all. But my mother, she just looked at me, her expression unreadable. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. I had said my piece. I had broken free from the chains of their expectations. But now, there was no going back. The ties that had bound me to them, to their opinions, had been severed. I stood up to leave, my heart pounding with both excitement and fear. But just as I was about to walk out, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It was a text from someone I never expected to hear from, a designer I admired, offering me a chance to collaborate on a high-profile project in LA. It was the opportunity I had been waiting for, the one that could launch my career to new heights. I stared at the message, my mind racing. This was it. This was the turning point. With a deep breath, I put my phone back in my pocket, knowing that this moment, this decision, would define everything. The city was quieter than usual that night. From the window of my penthouse, I watched as the lights flickered below, like tiny stars caught in the web of the bustling city. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful, as if the storm that had been brewing for weeks was finally pausing for a breath. But I knew it wasn't over. Far from it. I had made a breakthrough, no doubt about it. But the real test was still ahead. I sank into the plush chair, letting the silence envelop me. It felt like I had won a battle. But the war wasn't finished. The victory was only temporary. I could still feel the weight of my family's disapproval lingering in the back of my mind. The dinner, the confrontation, everything had been a catalyst. But I wasn't done yet. I was still uncertain in places. Was I really ready to let go of the past? The family who had never believed in me? The brother who thought I was just a passing phase? Could I really take the reins of my life? Or would I be drawn back into their web of expectations? But something had shifted in me. It wasn't just about the money or the jet, or even the apartment. It was about my own belief in myself. For the first time in a long time, I could see myself for who I truly was, not the person they tried to mold, but the person I was becoming. I closed my eyes, taking in a deep breath. Tonight, I wasn't going to sit idly by. I wasn't going to be passive anymore. This was my moment, and I was going to take control. Just as I was reflecting on what was to come, my phone buzzed. A new message. It was an invitation. A major entrepreneur in the design world was interested in collaborating with me on a high-profile project. The email was brief but to the point. This was exactly what I had been waiting for, an opportunity to solidify my place in the industry. Excitement surged through me. But with that excitement came a surge of pressure. The weight of it all was starting to sink in. This wasn't just an opportunity, it was my future on the line. I could already feel the pressure mounting. Could I really handle this? Could I succeed where I'd been told time and time again that I wouldn't? But as the uncertainty threatened to swallow me whole, I realized that this was the exact moment I had been preparing for. The chance to prove not just to the world, but to myself, that I could handle it all. I had always been underestimated. My family, especially my brother, had always seen me as the failure. But now, here I was on the verge of a breakthrough that would show them all just how wrong they were. I had to do this. I wasn't going to back down. This wasn't just about business. It was about taking control of my life, once and for all. With renewed determination, I picked up my phone. I called my brother. I knew he wouldn't understand. He never did. And sure enough, when he answered, his tone was dripping with sarcasm. "What now?" he scoffed. "I guess you're trying to make this whole businesswoman thing stick?" "I just wanted to let you know," I said calmly, "that I've accepted an offer to collaborate on a high-profile project. It's exactly the opportunity I've been waiting for." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then he let out a laugh. "Yeah, right. You've done what now? Are you sure you're not in over your head? You think this is going to make you successful?" His mockery hit hard, but I didn't flinch. "I've done more than you've ever given me credit for," I said, my voice steady. "And I'm not asking for your approval anymore. This is my life." "You'll see," he muttered. "This is just a phase, Monaco. You're gonna burn out. Trust me." I hung up the phone, a mix of frustration and pride swirling in my chest. He'd never change. He'd always see me as the little sister who could never amount to anything. But that was okay. I didn't need his validation anymore. What mattered now was my path. Then, my father called. I almost didn't want to answer, but I knew that I had to. "Monaco?" His voice was colder than usual. "I heard about your new project. Are you sure you're ready for this? This kind of work? It's not a joke." I felt the familiar sting of his disappointment. I'd heard this before, but this time, I was ready. "I don't need your approval, Dad," I said, a finality in my voice. "I've made my decision, and I'm going through with it, regardless of what you think." There was a long silence. For a moment, I thought he would argue more, but he didn't. Instead, he muttered, "Just don't say I didn't warn you." I let out a deep breath as I ended the call. The weight of his words didn't affect me as much anymore. The person I was today was no longer defined by their judgment. The chains that had held me back for so long were breaking. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. The road ahead was filled with obstacles, and I had to be prepared for whatever came my way. But at least I had one thing that I'd never had before: control. My life was finally in my hands. As the day went on, the pressure continued to build. The fear of failure, of falling back into old patterns, loomed over me. What if this new project didn't work out? What if I was wrong to think I could handle it all? The doubt crept in again, threatening to swallow me whole. But then I remembered everything I had been through to get here. The years of being dismissed, belittled, and mocked. This was my moment to prove them wrong once and for all. I wasn't going to let fear hold me back. I was done living in the shadows of their expectations. I made my decision. I texted my brother and my father. I didn't need their approval anymore. This was for me. I was doing this for myself. No more doubts. No more playing it safe. I was ready. As I walked out of my apartment, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. I had made the decision. Now I just had to see it through. Then my phone buzzed again. A new email. I opened it and my heart skipped a beat. It was from one of my competitors, someone I had been keeping an eye on for months. The email was vague but hinted at a plan to undermine my upcoming project. The pressure mounted. I stared at the message, my mind racing. This wasn't going to be easy. But if anything, it only solidified my resolve. I wasn't going to back down now. This was it. The final push. The evening air in my penthouse felt thick with tension. The city outside, lit by 1,000 tiny lights, seemed so distant compared to the storm that was raging in my mind. I stood at the window, staring out over the skyline, knowing that everything was about to change. The past few weeks had been a blur of breakthroughs, fights, and moments of clarity. But now, there was one final obstacle in my path. The call from my competitor had left me with a mix of anger and motivation. The game had shifted, and I couldn't afford to play by anyone's rules anymore. If I was going to win, I needed to confront the source of my doubts and fears. I needed to go head-to-head with the person who had been undermining me from the start. No more hesitation. No more second-guessing. I had made it this far by trusting myself, and today, I was going to prove that I wasn't backing down. The meeting was set. This was my moment. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the surge of adrenaline coursing through me. The weight of my decisions pressed on me, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't turn back. There was no other way forward. I was going to confront them, head on. The knock at the door broke my focus, and I knew it was time. The competitor had arrived. I opened the door to find someone I knew all too well. The person standing before me wasn't just a business rival. They were someone who'd been in my life for years, someone I once trusted. Their smile, though genuine on the surface, carried an unmistakable air of arrogance. They were here to win, to take everything I had worked for. But not today. "Monaco," they said, stepping into the penthouse. "You've really made quite a name for yourself, haven't you?" I felt the edge in their tone, the veiled challenge, and I knew this wasn't going to be a simple meeting. They wanted to undermine me. They wanted to make me feel small again. But I wasn't that person anymore. "I've worked hard for everything I've got," I replied calmly, meeting their gaze. "More than you'll ever know." The tension between us was immediate. Each word felt like a calculated move, each glance an assessment of weakness. They were trying to intimidate me, to make me second-guess my every decision, but I wasn't biting. We sat down across from each other, the negotiation table between us. It wasn't just a table, it was a battlefield, and I wasn't going to lose this fight. The competitor leaned forward, their eyes glinting with a sense of superiority. "Here's the deal," they started, their voice smooth but laced with a challenge. "We could collaborate on this project, share the spotlight, and make a lot of money. But you'll have to give up some control. A lot of it, actually. You know how these things work." My heart rate quickened, but I didn't let it show. The competitor was trying to box me into a corner, to take away what I had worked for. They wanted to split the profits and leave me with little more than the scraps, but I wasn't going to accept that. "I think you've got it all wrong," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I don't need your partnership. I've built my success from the ground up. I'm not going to let you dictate the terms of my future." They scoffed, leaning back in their chair. "You think you can do this on your own? You'll never make it without help." I could feel my blood begin to boil, the nerve, but instead of letting the anger take over, I focused on what mattered. My next move. My counterproposal. "I don't need your help," I said. "What I need is for you to back off. You can take your offer and shove it. I'm doing this my way." The competitor's smile faltered, but only for a moment. They tried to maintain their composure, but I could see the doubt creeping into their eyes. They were starting to realize that I wasn't the naive young woman they once knew. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had the power now. The meeting continued, but the balance of power had shifted. I could feel it in the way the competitor's words became less sharp, less confident. And that's when I saw it, the weakness. They had been hiding something, a major flaw in their strategy, and I was going to expose it, but not yet. I kept my poker face on, waiting for the right moment. I wasn't going to let them know I'd already won. I let them keep digging their own hole, watching as they revealed more and more of their strategy. They thought they were in control, but I was the one pulling the strings. When the moment came, I laid it all out. "You've been hiding a major conflict of interest," I said, my voice calm but deadly. "If I were to accept your proposal, it would destroy your credibility, and I'm not going to let that happen." The competitor's face went pale. The smirk disappeared. They had been caught. The tension in the room was palpable as they scrambled to save face. But it was too late. The damage was done. They tried to backtrack, to offer more compromises, but I wasn't having it. The negotiation was over. I had won. I'm done, I said, standing up and offering my hand. You lost. Now, get out of my way. The competitors stared at my hand for a moment, their pride still fighting to the surface, but in the end, they took it. They backed down. I watched them leave, feeling a strange mix of triumph and guilt. I had played my cards perfectly, but there was something about the way I'd used their weakness against them that didn't sit right. Still, the victory was mine. As I stood in the silence of my penthouse, I realized that this was only the beginning. I had taken control. I had fought and won, but there was more to come. I picked up my phone to check the messages, and there it was, an email. The subject line, exciting opportunity, let's talk. It was from a competitor I hadn't expected to hear from, someone I thought had been out of my life for good. The message hinted at an offer, one that could change everything for me. I felt a rush of excitement and hesitation. Another challenge, another decision to make. Would I take this new opportunity, or would it bring more complications? I stared at the phone screen, my mind racing. This was the final twist, and I didn't know if I was ready for it. The quiet hum of the city outside my penthouse contrasted sharply with the whirlwind inside me. I sat by the window, looking at the skyline, but my thoughts were miles away. The meeting with my competitor had been everything I expected, intense, exhausting, and ultimately a game changer. But it had also left me with more questions than answers. I had come so far, but now I was standing at a precipice, unsure if my next steps would take me up or send me crashing down. The weight of the decisions I'd made today felt heavier than ever. The competitor had been relentless, pushing every button, testing my resolve. And yet, in the end, I had walked away victorious. At least, that's what I told myself. But the truth was, the victory felt hollow. The emotional toll had left me drained, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. The phone call earlier had shaken me to my core, bringing back memories I thought I'd buried long ago. I couldn't ignore it. There was something I had to do, something that needed to be addressed before I could move forward. As the minutes ticked by, I felt the pressure building inside me. The confrontation had pushed me to the edge, but now it was time to face the real battle. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about everything I'd fought for, my independence, my success, my future. It was about taking control of my own destiny once and for all. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was an unexpected call from someone I hadn't heard from in years. My pulse quickened. I knew who it was before I even picked up. Monaco, a familiar voice said, warm but guarded. It's been a long time. It was him, the person I had once trusted more than anyone else. The person who had been there when I was just starting out, before everything became so complicated. And now, after everything, he was offering help. He could solve everything, take away the pressure. But there was a catch. There always was. Monaco, I know you've been struggling with your decisions, he continued. I can help. I can get you the leverage you need to take down your competitor for good, but you'll have to trust me. You'll have to let go of some of your control. I felt my stomach drop. The offer was tempting, almost too good to pass up. But at what cost? To accept help meant relinquishing the very independence I had fought so hard to maintain. The memory of past betrayals hit me hard. Could I trust him again? Could I afford not to? Let me think about it, I said, trying to hide the emotion creeping into my voice. I hung up, feeling torn. The weight of the decision hung over me. My mind raced. Was this the lifeline I needed? Or was I opening myself up to yet another betrayal? For hours, I paced back and forth in my penthouse, the call echoing in my head. The pride that had driven me this far seemed like a double-edged sword now. I had always prided myself on standing alone, proving myself without help. But now, I was faced with a choice that would define the next chapter of my life. Could I sacrifice my independence for the chance at true success? The longer I thought about it, the clearer the answer became. I didn't have to do this alone. I had been strong enough to get this far, but I wasn't infallible. The stakes were too high now. I needed to trust someone, just this once. If I didn't, I might lose everything. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. My voice was steady as I spoke. I'm in. Let's do it your way. There was silence on the other end before he responded, a hint of relief in his voice. You won't regret this, Monaco. We'll take them down together. The decision was made. And with that, I felt a surge of strength I hadn't felt in weeks. The plan was in motion, and I had an ally who believed in me. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had control again. But just as the sense of relief washed over me, I received an unexpected message. It was from someone I had never expected to hear from again. The message was brief, but the implications were clear. There was a new threat. Someone was trying to sabotage everything I had worked for, and they had a personal vendetta against me. The message didn't identify the sender, but the warning was enough. I had a target on my back. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. Just when I thought I had everything under control, a new complication emerged. I couldn't afford to let my guard down now. The fight was far from over. As I prepared to confront this new threat, I felt the weight of the challenge pressing down on me. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about survival. I spent the next few hours strategizing, going over every detail. But then, as if fate itself was mocking me, I received another unexpected call. This time, it was from the person I had once trusted, the one who had offered help. Monaco, they said, their voice low and filled with urgency. We need to talk. It's bigger than we thought. My heart sank. Whatever I was facing, it was about to get much worse. The stillness of my penthouse felt heavier tonight. I stood by the window, the city below twinkling like 1,000 little promises. But as I watched the lights, there was no peace to be found in them. No matter how much I had accomplished, the final confrontation loomed ahead, and I knew the stakes were higher than ever. I wasn't sure what would come from this moment, but the feeling in my gut told me it was either make or break. I had fought so hard to reach this point, to build a life that was mine, independent, free from the past. But now, as the time to face my adversary drew near, that old fear crept in. I could feel it clawing at my insides, a familiar ache of uncertainty that always seemed to appear when I was on the edge of something big. The fear of failure, the fear of losing everything I had fought for, it was all there. I tried to shake it off. This was no time for hesitation. I was ready, or at least, I had to be. I had no choice but to step into the arena and face the storm head-on. The past few days had set the stage for this moment, and nothing would stop me from seeing it through. I had earned my place in this world, and no one, not even the shadowy figures trying to tear me down, was going to take it from me now. But just as I began to focus, trying to steady myself before the final push, a sharp, unsettling sound broke the calm. My phone buzzed across the table. I picked it up, and my stomach dropped. The message was clear. Someone had leaked information to the press. Personal details from my past, things I'd worked so hard to bury, were about to be exposed to the world. It hit me like a punch to the gut. The leak spread quickly. I could already imagine the headlines, the way the press would twist the facts, dragging up things I'd long ago moved past. This was it, the moment my worst fear had become reality. I was being torn down, and the timing couldn't have been worse. The PR nightmare had arrived just when I needed to be at my best. I slammed the phone down, my mind spinning. How had this happened? Who was behind it? I couldn't afford to waste time figuring out the how. I had to act, and fast. The pressure was on, and I could feel it building inside of me, threatening to overwhelm everything I had worked for. But I wasn't about to let it. Not now. Not after everything. I called my most trusted allies, people I'd built relationships with, who knew the real me. They had my back when I needed them most, and now, I needed them again. I briefed them quickly, laying out the plan. We were going to take control of the narrative. We couldn't let this story define me, not when I was so close to winning the battle. The team rallied together, ready to fight. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. I wasn't alone anymore. I'd built this support system. People believed in me, trusted me, and now it was time to show the world what I was really capable of. The intensity of the moment wasn't lost on me. The battle I was about to fight wasn't just about business or image, it was about the culmination of everything I'd worked for. It was about showing the world that I wasn't just a woman trying to survive in a world of power-hungry men. I was a force to be reckoned with. I had built my empire from the ground up, and no one, no matter how hard they tried, was going to take it from me. The phone buzzed again, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was time. I stood face to face with my adversary. The person who had been pulling the strings from behind the scenes was now in front of me. I could feel the tension thickening the air between us, an unspoken understanding of what was at stake. We both knew this wasn't just about a single business deal anymore. This was about proving who was in charge. "Do you really think you can take me down?" they sneered, their voice dripping with contempt. I didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to take you down. I'm simply claiming what's mine." The words were sharp, and for a second, the silence between us hung heavy. Then, the back and forth began. The accusations, the justifications, the calculated moves. Each word was like a blade being sharpened. "You're just a pawn in this game," they said, trying to push my buttons. "You'll never win." I leaned forward, meeting their gaze with unshakable confidence. "Maybe it's time to realize the game is over for you." The tension was palpable, and I could see the frustration building in their eyes. The walls they'd built were starting to crack, and for the first time, I saw their fear. The fear that they'd underestimated me, that their plan was slipping away. Then came the revelation. Just when I thought the battle was about to tip in my favor, a piece of information surfaced that turned the tide. The truth about my adversary's motives came to light, and suddenly, everything made sense. They weren't just trying to beat me, they were afraid of losing everything. Their power was slipping away, and they had been desperately trying to maintain control. They were no different from me, someone fighting to survive, someone fighting to keep their place in the world. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But I wasn't here to show sympathy. I was here to finish what I'd started. "You're afraid," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Afraid of losing control. Afraid of what comes next. But the truth is, you never had control to begin with." The words hit like a bombshell. I had made my final move. The conversation shifted. The intensity had reached its peak, and I knew that the end was near. My adversary tried to salvage the situation, but it was too late. I had made my stand, and they had no choice but to back down. "I'm done with this," I said, my tone final. "I won, and now, it's time for you to step aside." I watched as they left, their defeat clear. But as I stood there, feeling the weight of the victory, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this wasn't over. The phone buzzed again. I looked at the screen, and my heart skipped a beat. The message was simple, yet chilling. "Is this really over, or is it just beginning?" I stared at the screen, my mind racing. The battle I thought I had won was far from finished. And somewhere in the shadows, someone else was pulling the strings, waiting for their moment to strike. The morning, after the final confrontation, felt eerily quiet. I sat by the window in my penthouse, staring out at the city that seemed unchanged. Yet everything within me had shifted. The battle had taken its toll physically, emotionally, and mentally, but there was a clarity now that hadn't been there before. I was exhausted, my body aching from the weight of it all, but the relief was slowly sinking in. The war was over, and yet it wasn't. Looking back on everything, I realized just how far I had come. The betrayals, the endless challenges, the times I had felt completely alone, they all led me here. I was no longer that scared, uncertain person from the beginning. Somewhere in the chaos, I had become someone different, someone who had faced the worst and kept moving forward. It hadn't been easy, and the scars would remain, but I was still here. That was what mattered. The decisions I'd made during the battle had irrevocably changed me. I had won, but victory didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like a turning point. The choices I'd made, the people I'd confronted, had forced me to grow in ways I couldn't have predicted. And now, as I sat there, with the weight of everything I'd fought for still pressing down on me, I knew the journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. The battle was done, but the consequences? They were only starting to unfold. I had to face it, the consequences of everything that had happened. Sure, the immediate threat had passed, but I couldn't ignore the ripple effect this battle would have on every part of my life. My reputation, the relationships I'd worked so hard to rebuild, all of it was at risk. The cost of this victory was high, and I knew there would be no easy way to make things right. I called on the people who had been there for me throughout this fight, my allies, my friends. The conversation wasn't easy. We talked about what came next, about the fallout from the things I'd said, the decisions I'd made. It was hard to look at the pieces of my life scattered around me and figure out how to put them back together. But I also knew that I had built something worth protecting. I couldn't let it all fall apart now, not after everything. For the first time in my life, I felt the full weight of leadership. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the empire I had built, the people who depended on me, and the future I still had to create. I couldn't just walk away from it all. I had to rebuild it. I had to ensure that my choices didn't destroy everything I had worked for. But that didn't mean I had to do it alone. I was surrounded by people who believed in me, who were ready to help me pick up the pieces and rebuild. The sense of unity was there, but so was the pressure. I wasn't just a woman looking to make it through the day anymore. I was the one responsible for shaping the future, and that responsibility was heavy. As I sat with those who had stood by me, I realized that this wasn't just about surviving the battle. It was about thriving in the aftermath. I didn't want to simply rebuild. I wanted to create something better, something that would last. I had come this far, and I wasn't about to let it all slip away. It was time to let go of the past, truly let go. I had been holding on to old wounds, old fears, things that no longer served me. To move forward, I had to forgive. Not just others, but myself. The mistakes I had made, the things I had done that I regretted, they were all part of my journey. I had to accept that they didn't define me. I wasn't the mistakes I'd made, and I wasn't the fears that had held me back. This was a pivotal moment for me. I needed to look at myself honestly, to face the things that scared me, and to let go of the weight that had been holding me down. Forgiveness wasn't just about others. It was about releasing myself from the chains I'd placed around my own heart. And with that release came peace. The clarity I needed to move forward was finally within my reach. But letting go wasn't the end of the journey. It was the beginning. Now that I had cleared the emotional clutter, I could focus on what really mattered. It wasn't about fighting battles anymore. It was about building a life that reflected who I had become, strong, independent, and no longer afraid of what the future held. I started to make moves, big ones. I wasn't waiting for permission anymore. I wasn't afraid of the consequences, because I knew I could handle whatever came my way. My career, my relationships, everything was now in my hands. I was no longer a passive participant in my own life. I was driving the story forward, and I wasn't looking back. I decided to make a public statement, not just about my future plans, but about the journey I had been through, about the lessons I'd learned, the battles I'd fought, and the person I had become. I wanted the world to know that I wasn't just some survivor. I was a leader, and I had the strength to guide others through their own struggles. The declaration was bold, but it felt right. I had nothing to hide anymore. My story was my own, and I was going to own it. Just as things seemed to settle, I received a message. It was from someone I hadn't expected to hear from again. Someone from my past who had once been an adversary, but now, they were offering an unexpected alliance. The idea of teaming up with this person felt strange. They had once been my enemy, and now they were offering their help. It was tempting, but I had to be cautious. Could I trust them? Or was this just another way for them to manipulate me? I thought about it long and hard. There was a part of me that wanted to stand alone, to continue the fight on my own terms. But I also knew that the road ahead would be challenging. Maybe this alliance could help me face what was coming. Or maybe it would be the final piece that pushed me further toward my own destiny. I didn't have all the answers, but I was ready for whatever came next. The future was uncertain, but I was no longer afraid. I had faced the hardest battles, and now I was ready to move forward with purpose. Whatever came my way, I would handle it, because I had learned that the only thing holding me back was myself. I took a deep breath and stepped forward.